Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and earn even more money. All in one place, and it's for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup looks like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. Best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since we discovered Spotify for Podcasters, we feel like having options like video podcasts, Q&A, and polls has let us be creative on a whole other level. I highly recommend you give it a try. So download Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Welcome to the X's and T podcast, where we talk about X's and T with your hosts, Corey
and Dani. Welcome back to the X's and T podcast. Here we are, the day after Independence Day. Back to reality, back to work.
Reality. We're here late night coming at you.
Late nights, and we've had a lot of struggles with our pool today.
Oh, God. Yeah. It's draining for what, the second time or third time?
This is our second time draining the damn pool.
We can't get it even.
We're not pool people.
Yeah, we've discovered this.
It's one of those, the above ground pools. It's not a big pool. It's not freaking rocket science.
It is to us.
And for some reason, we can't get this pool right. So if you know how to make one of these pools work, please let us know, because I don't know what the hell we're doing.
Hopefully we'll have it figured out by tomorrow. Third time's the charm, right?
Third time's the charm. We'll keep you updated with our pool situation.
It's been a hot mess over here.
So today, we're super excited to continue our whole saga with our whole story with Kyle. Just finished. If you haven't listened before, you got to go check out our first, 3 episodes to hear Corey's story. It's incredible. You have to hear all of it. It's one of those things where if you don't watch it in sequence, it's not going to make sense later.
Yeah, you got to get the full effect. You got to listen to everything.
Exactly. So we're actually going to pick up where I come into this story.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy, because we mentioned in our second episode where we talked about how you and Kyle were together, and that really brief moment about kind of where he and I started talking. So that's actually kind of where this begins.
Yeah.
Well, let's backtrack quite a bit. Kyle and I went to an alternative school. We'll call it an alternative school. It's out in the area that he is in. It's about a 6-month program where you are away from your family, and it's like a boarding school almost.
Yeah. My brother went there too.
Yeah, my brother did too. And a couple of friends of ours actually had also gone there. So I went to this program because I was one of those troubled high school kids. I was not going to school every day. My brother went there and found success. One of his friends went there and had success. And so my mom, she was like, naturally, you should probably go to this program too.
Naturally, you're going to be a failure. You need to go.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I did not make all the right decisions in high school, and I went to...
Does anybody?
No, but I made extra bad decisions.
Same.
So when I was in high school, I didn't go. I skipped school all the time. It was very difficult. And I think a lot of it stemmed from me choosing the wrong programs in high school to be a part of. I was friends with this friendship group, and they were all big into art. I am not an art person. You know me so well now. I hate art.
Yeah, same.
But I decided that I was going to go to an art academy.
Oh, dear.
That was not a good place for me. So I just skipped school a lot.
I would too if I... went to an art academy.
Yeah, it was not a good place for me to be. So I went to this program. It was the summer after my sophomore year. So it basically took over the majority of what would be my junior year of high school. And it was kind of crazy. I'm really excited. We should have an episode where I talk about that experience. Yeah. That was so much. But ultimately, I went to this program. It's 22 weeks, and I graduated. I finished. That's kind of where I finished high school. I tried to go back to high school after that. It didn't really work out well.
Right.
And then after military school, I actually went and got married to somebody who was actually in the program with me. It was awful.
Plot twist.
Yeah. In a whole different episode, we'll talk about, kind of my upbringing and where I come from and why this decision was made. But ultimately, I did get married at the age of 18 to some dude who was in the military. We actually got married on his graduation day from basic training. Yeah, it was, oh gosh, I'm so embarrassed saying this out loud, but it is a part of the story and it is relevant.
Right.
So me and
because it does come into play later.
It does. So me and this guy are together. Obviously, we're 18 years old and dumb and not right for each other at all. So things are not going well. We have a child, my oldest child at the time. So we're literally at the point where we're going to get divorced. We're honestly only not even 2 full years to the point of us getting married.
Oh, wow.
A year and a half is what we lasted. And so we were at this point where we're going to split up. I had moved away from my family. I had lived in Sierra Vista, Arizona when he was in AIT. And then we lived in Gouverneur, New York, which was about 45 minutes from military post in Watertown, which is Fort Drum. Now, anybody in the military that I have talked to, that I have met, and they've, we've ended up talking about my life as a military wife, and I tell them I was at Fort Drum, their reactions are almost always the same. And it's like, how did you survive?
Yikes.
Because Gouverneur, New York is literally like a teeny tiny little town. So what's funny is I went from the border of Mexico to the border of Canada.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So it was a total...
one extreme to the other.
Yes, and it snowed so fucking much, dude.
Oh, God.
From October, and it didn't stop until fucking May.
Jeez.
I literally learned to hate the snow after that.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in Portland. We'd either go to the snow or the snow would come to us every so often. We get snowstorms maybe once every few years. I hated the snow.
Yeah, that's a big reason why we moved to Arizona.
Yes, huge reason. Because I would get what I felt was like cabin fever almost. You're inside all the time. I didn't have any friends out there, and it was just a mess. So we're about a year and a half into this marriage, and our child is at this point about 6 months old, roughly. And that's when I did decide to leave. I had this notion that my ex-husband was unfaithful to me. And so I had decided, like, that's it. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And it was kind of my out. I was looking for an out anyways.
Right.
So I
you
had
saw it and you took it.
Yes. So maybe about a month before I was scheduled to go home, I had been on Facebook reconnecting with people from military school because it really hadn't been that long since graduation. And I was still friends with some of them. And Kyle was actually one of those people that I was friends with on Facebook. So you and I were actually going through recently my old messages with Kyle from the very first time I started talking to him. Yeah. And what's so funny is when I started talking to him was a Facebook post that he had made about, and it didn't register with me that that's what had happened, but it was his post about coming back from a mental hospital.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I remember we literally just talked about it, and yeah. Oh,
yes.
God, yeah.
We were both kind of shocked. We're like, wait, is that really what started this?
Yeah.
Because I think I had commented on it, and I was like, hey, I'm so sorry you're going through this, because when you see somebody struggling, you want to try to be there for them.
Right.
And so I tried to be, and I remember it being such an odd conversation, and he basically talked his way out of it. He's like, no, it was a huge misunderstanding. Like, they had to send me there. It was part of their procedures. And so...
There's always an excuse for everything.
Every time. And so I had just kept talking to him kind of on and off, and he and my ex-husband knew each other from military school because we all went at the same time.
Right.
But they were not friends. So we would talk. I think we started talking before you and him got together. And then it was very sporadic. And then I want to say probably around March is when it became very consistent. And at that point, we would talk on Facebook Messenger, and we would only talk on Kick. So it was so funny because I remember you bringing up Kick, and I totally forgot about Kick.
Yeah.
And he would only talk to me on this, and he told me it was because his phone wasn't working and it was only working on Wi-Fi or something like that, just some ridiculous excuse. And eventually he would give me his phone number, and we would have phone conversations. And the thing about Kyle, and I think the thing that drew me in, is that we were just alike, like scary, similar.
Right.
Like, I have this fascination. I love true crime, right? And I have a very like most people who like true crime, you kind of find your favorite serial killer. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this twisted person would do all this stuff.
Right.
And you research them, you listen to all the podcasts, whatever. And my favorite one is the Zodiac Killer. that one, in my opinion, is a classic.
Right.
Not by any means a good thing, but just the one that kind of intrigued me the most.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying, oh, my favorite's the Zodiac. And I was like, no way, mine too. And it's because I had told him that prior in a different conversation. So what did he do?
Gotta make himself like you.
Yes, exactly. That's what this narcissistic sociopathic fuck did. He convinced me that we were like basically the same person. And
wow.
Me going through this like divorce pretty much and like my separation.
You're at a vulnerable state.
Exactly. And so one of the things that he did not tell me at first was that he had a girlfriend.
Me.
Yeah. So I found this out by like, because I was not super active on Facebook, but I don't even think it was, I think it was that I found out on Facebook because he had in a relationship with, and then it had your name there.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, it was all over Facebook.
Right. And after our conversation, or after our last episode, a couple previous episodes, we learned that you guys had only been together for 2 months.
Right.
He talked to me as if you guys had been together for a long time and he was just sick of it. That was like...
Nope.
Yeah, isn't that psychotic?
Yeah.
So he basically like painted you out as this person that he was so sick of that you would try to unalive yourself if he was going to break up with you, and basically like planning to meet up with me when I got to Oregon.
Right.
And he would like 3-way call you and him and me, and I would be sitting there silent, and he'd be like, oh, I need to take this call, and he'd just patch me in, and then you guys would start arguing, and it's because he would pick a fight with you. And back then I didn't see it that way, but I 100% know now that that's exactly what was going on.
Right.
He had to paint you out to be bad in order for him to be able to continue communicating with me.
Right.
And he had even told me about other girls that he had been talking to as well, in addition to you, which...
What a scumbag.
I don't even know why I don't know. I don't know why I was okay with that.
Right.
And it's not one of my proudest moments. You guys, I promise, like, I am so sorry.
She's literally apologized to me so many times.
Literally, like, randomly out of the blue, I'm like, dude, I'm so sorry that this ever happened. But it's not one of my finest moments. And actually what put a stop to it was because I was getting ready to, I was like days from coming home. My plane tickets were bought. Everything was packed. I'm coming home. I'm staying there. I'm supposed to meet up with Kyle. And my ex-husband commented on your Facebook status and said, why is your boyfriend talking
no, he messaged
to my
me.
wife? No, so he commented on your status first, and then he messaged you about it. Because I have these messages with Kyle, and he's like, why did he comment on her status publicly like that? And then ultimately you guys had this conversation about me and Kyle talking, and Kyle was like, hey, you need to play dumb, like tell her, like, I'm at her house, I'm here, her family's like yelling at me, like you need to tell her it's not true. And then he would be like, I'm sorry that you misunderstood what our friendship was, all of these different things. And it was very manipulative and it was so hurtful. And I just remember feeling like shit.
Right.
Because I know that that's fucked up what I did, and it was very, very hard for me to feel like, wow, I really did get used and manipulated, and like I hurt this other person, and I didn't want to hurt you, so I lied to you.
Right.
In our messages, I never once said that it was true. I just let it go. And then Kyle and I just stopped talking. And through pretty much the entirety of 2013, we had no other conversations. So I continued living my life. I ended up splitting totally with my ex-husband. I moved back home, and it sucked because I lived back with my mom, and not very many people know this, but my mom is a narcissist. My mom has her own mental health disorder. She was a very abusive parent. She was very verbally abusive, very manipulative, and just not what a mom should have been.
Right.
And it was really hard for me because I was poisoned against my father. I was told all of these lies. I never felt like I could trust him. And it wasn't, I mean, honestly, today, my dad's my hero.
Right.
Like, I am so close with my dad today because I've learned that all those things that she said were not true.
Right.
And sometimes it's still hard to be vulnerable and to say those things out loud because I do still have family members who don't want to believe it, or they kind of enable it, and it sucks.
Right.
But 2013 was really trying to get on my feet to be able to move out. So I got a job through a friend of mine doing caregiving. It was not by any means a glamorous job, but it was my first full-time 40-hour-a-week job.
Right. Your first big girl job.
My first big girl job, yep, was wiping ass, and it sucked. I'm not gonna lie. It sucked. sucked. But, you know, I feel like I did develop like a bond and a connection with the clients. You know, you do. You can't help your, like, these are intimate moments with these people.
Right. You're all up in their business.
You're all up in their business.
Like, literally.
And you do. You end up caring so much for these people. And one of them actually ended up being somebody that I knew. Her brother was in the care home. So I really did enjoy the job while I was there. But in 2014, so April or March, end of March, early April of 2014 is when I was on Facebook and somebody had already told me that Kyle's girlfriend was pregnant. I was like, no way. And he popped up on my people you may know. And so I messaged him just, I swear, innocently saying, hey, congratulations. I heard you're going to be a dad.
Right.
And he would go,
like, honestly, most people would do that. Like, if they know somebody, they would reach out and be like, hey, like, congratulations. Like, that is not like an odd thing that you did. Like,
right.
that.
Right.
That's
right.
just like you genuinely being like a friendly congratulations.
Yeah. And if we can find some of these messages and obviously edit them,
yeah,
you'll be able to see some of these conversations because they're wild. That's exactly what I did. And within the first few messages, I think we looked at them. He was like, but apparently I'm not going to know this child and he's not going to have my last name because I'm a terrible person.
Well, you are. So,
yeah. No, absolutely. But me, back then, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that he was this terrible, horrible, awful person.
Right. And at first, like, when I first got pregnant, before, like, everything happened at my house, and if you've heard my story, then you kind of know what I'm talking about. But he was going to have his last name.
Yeah.
Like, my son. Like, we named him basically, specifically what Kyle wanted to name him. And then after that happened, I was like, no.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
no,
so I changed that real quick.
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely don't blame you.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was being fed this, like, she's crazy. She's keeping my kid from me.
Of course,
Like, I will never see this child, and it makes me so sad. Like,
right.
painting himself out to be this victim that very obviously he was not.
Right.
So this is my first interaction with him, and he immediately, like, calls me. He's like, hey, can I call you? I still have your number. So he called me, and we had, like, a 2 or 3 hour phone conversation as if we were best friends, never, like, as
skipped
if
a beat.
Exactly. And one of the things that he told me on this very first phone call was of his life struggles. And one of his life struggles was that he was being investigated for this crime that he swore up and down
he didn't do.
He did not commit. And he was very forthcoming with the information. He was like, yep, well, what I perceived at the time as forthcoming with this information, right? He didn't try to hide it. He wasn't like, he didn't try to skate by. He literally told me our first phone conversation that he was being investigated for shooting up a house.
It's such a random first conversation to have with somebody, though. Like,
I think he did it to cover his ass.
Probably.
Because as you'll learn through my story, that he did that a lot. He would preemptively say something to cover his own ass for later.
Makes sense.
And so I took it as, oh, wow, he must be telling the truth because he told me.
Honest.
Yeah, he was so honest. He told me. He told me first thing. And maybe I can trust him. You know, if the justice system does its job, they'll see that he is innocent.
Right.
That was genuinely my thinking. And that's fucking stupid of me. Trust me, I know. But I was okay with it.
Right.
I was like, okay, sure. You know, I didn't think
you didn't know.
No, yeah, I didn't know that he, one, did it. And two, I didn't think we were going to pursue a relationship.
Right.
And then it very quickly turned into a relationship. I mean, I had Mondays and Fridays off, which, by the way, if those are your days off, I have so much empathy for you because those days fucking suck to have as your days off. I worked like 11 to 7, and so I would get off at 7 o'clock at night on like a Friday, right? And then I would have to work Saturday and Sunday. So I'd drive 3 hours to where he lived from where I lived.
Jeez.
Just to hang out with him, and I would drive to work the next day. I would leave early enough just to get to work. And then on like Sundays, I worked early shift so I could leave earlier, but then I still had to go, and then I could be there on Monday, and then I would go to work on Tuesday. And I did that for a couple of months. Every day off that I had, I was up there. And I mean, at first it seemed fine. Right. You know, just like your story, right? You had this honeymoon phase where
everything was perfect.
Yeah, exactly. We were going on adventures. I was a single mom at the time, and my mom did not really want to babysit. She was never that grandparent who wanted to.
Right.
She did do it though sometimes. She was very nice sometimes and was like, hey, I would gladly babysit. But, you know, I felt like because I'm a single mom, I have to take my kid with me. And so I regret a lot of that. I do, but I didn't have any other choice. If I was going to go somewhere, he was coming with me. And so we all just had this bond really quickly. So we're hanging out. We're doing this for a couple of months. Like, I'd already wanted to move to the area that he was living. That was a huge goal of mine anyways, because I fell in love with it because that's where the program was.
Right.
And I had actually lived out there with my oldest brother for a while. And so my job, actually, I was working on getting a transfer over there. And I was looking for apartments over there. And in June, I was approved for an apartment over there. By myself, mind you. Solely me. I was approved.
Make this very clear.
Yeah. So I was supposed to move out there with my child by myself. I had this really cute, like, 2-bedroom apartment. It was what a first apartment in ideal world would look like.
Right.
So we go up and I'm there. I signed papers and then I have dinner at Kyle's parents' house. And I remember this conversation very distinctly. This is a vivid memory. Stacy and Frank sit his sister Christina and myself and Kyle and my son all at the table. We're eating. We had Sibeli's pizza, which shout out. Good. I miss Sibeli's pizza. I don't love pizza, but like I love Sibeli's.
Sibeli's is so good.
So good. But we had Sibeli's pizza and they break the news that they are moving out of state.
Oh.
I know. Christina is bawling her effing eyes out.
Of course she is.
She was a fucking disaster.
The dramatics with her, I swear to God.
Yep.
They're always
and
so
she
much.
was so at this time I was in my 20s. I was 20 and she had to have been going on 22 at this time. And Kyle was also 20. So we were all adults at this point.
Right.
And
you're not children.
No. So it's like I understand the wanting for the parents to want to leave and, you know, their kids are old. That being said, Kyle, because of this investigation that was going on, was not allowed to leave the state of Oregon. They were moving to Montana. I don't know what conversation was had before this, but apparently Kyle was going to be living with me. And he put it this way. He's like, well, I'll live on the street. It's fine. I'll live in my Jeep. It's okay. Me and my dog will be in the Jeep. We'll be okay. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, obviously, I'm not going to let that happen.
Poor Chevy.
Yep. Chevy was his dog's name. And that dog would be Corey's first. And then it would later on be my dog. And we're very devastated that neither of us have him anymore.
R.I.P. Chevy.
Yeah, he did die, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But anyways, so on June 21st, which is the first day of summer, my favorite day of the year, I moved into my apartment, and Kyle was there with me. And I mean, at first, everything was fine.
Right.
Except the first really big red flag that came up was when your son was born. So through this time, he really never talked about you. And if he did, it was very derogatory. And it was very like, oh, I tried to call her, but she didn't respond.
She's such a bitch or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. So he would just not say anything at all. So through this time, you're pregnant, as we learned before.
Yeah.
So we are living fine. Well, we have this camping trip coming up because your son wasn't due for another couple of weeks.
Right.
And then also we find out, you know, the day before our camping trip, because we're supposed to go to Horse Fall. Do you know where that is? So it's like Coos Bay. It's the dunes. We were gonna take my ATV out there, and we were gonna go riding for the 4th of July. Which, honest to God,
sounds like a blast.
It was so fun.
Yeah.
Like if you take Kyle out of the picture,
right,
it was the funnest trip I've ever had. I swear. But we'll get into why that trip sucked. So Kyle's mom, Stacy, like texted him and was like, "Hey, she's going into labor." And then the next day, after she had found out that your son was born, she called him and was like, "Hey, we need to go to the hospital." And then he decided that I was going to drive him to the hospital.
Right.
Because we had one car working at the time.
Yeah.
So he would ultimately, I'd be in the parking lot, which I found out you later told him not to have me there. Just, again, understandable. And we were only there for maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah, not long.
Not long at all. And he pitched to me the story that you told him to leave. He was not allowed to be there anymore.
I was barely awake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, literally, you can ask my friend Lacey that was there. I literally was in and out. Like, I pretty much slept, like, the whole time.
Yeah.
I basically saw him walk in, sit down, and, like, look at my son, and then that was about it. And then The next time I look at him, he's walking out.
Yeah.
Well, I was like, okay, bye.
Okay, bye. Yeah. So he would come out to the car, and that was a very difficult time. I did forget something that I kind of want to reverse back to. So sorry.
It's okay.
There's things that I remember as far as red flags go, and I totally forgot, and I have it written down here in my notes, but I skipped it.
It's okay.
So before this, for his birthday, I forgot his birthday, but I know it's early June. But we went to this country concert beforehand. We saw Justin Moore. Shout out Justin Moore, is a freaking amazing concert. But we were supposed to go fishing the next day for his birthday trip. It was not on his actual birthday, but this day he was very different from what I had seen. I mean, he was, to me, acted like a very happy-go-lucky kind of guy, super charismatic. But this day he was very dark, and just like a cloud was over him. So we went fishing. My dad loaned us his fishing equipment. He gave us fishing poles. He was like, go have fun. Kyle dang near broke my dad's pole. He didn't, thank goodness, but he threw the biggest temper tantrum. Imagine, to my fellow Star Wars fans, Kylo Ren throwing a temper tantrum. It's the same thing. He was so angry about not being able to cast out well or catch a fish or anything. It's like,
him be bad at something? Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. And he acted like it was the fucking end of the world.
Oh, my God.
So we're there, and we're at my favorite lake. My favorite lake. It's Timothy Lake in Oregon. If anybody's been there, y'all know it is gorgeous out there. I grew up going there with my dad, and fishing, to me, I'm not good at it.
No, me
okay,
either.
I am not a fisherman. I'm not the person who's holding fish in every picture. I don't go out every weekend. I am not an expert, but I still enjoy it. It's fun to me to go and sit and quiet and listen to the noises around you and just be in the moment. He was not about it. So we were there, and there were these...
He probably wasn't about it because you enjoyed it.
I think that's it, and I think it might have been because I was a smidge better than him, and no one's allowed to be better than him.
How dare you?
Exactly. So we're there, and I remember I took my notebook with me everywhere. I had this notebook. I loved writing at the time, and I remember writing down, and it's so funny that I say this because it was like a foreboding almost, and I was like, well, if this is as bad as it gets, then that's okay, because he was angry. He was kind of pouting in a corner by himself, just being weird, and I thought that was his way of just getting his frustration out, and he didn't want to take it out on me. Was totally wrong, obviously, but in the moment I thought that was it. And then so I would stay the night at his house that night, and then on his actual birthday I did have to leave and go to work. And he was so upset and like angry with me, and I had so much stomach pain at this point, right? I had a lot of stomach pain, so he was obviously upset that I had to leave. I couldn't hang out with him on his birthday. It was odd. So I went home, I went to work, and then actually the weekend that I would move, because it wasn't too long after, the stomach pain like continued. I ended up having a really bad like kidney infection that he ended up having to drive me to the hospital too.
Yikes.
And then that night after the next day after I'd gotten out, we had gotten into an argument with my ex-husband, and it was like within a few days. I don't know exactly the time frame, but my ex-husband was supposed to sign over our vehicle to me, and he didn't. So my psycho ass drove to where he was living, and I was like, you promised me this, don't fuck with me. And then ultimately I would end up tripping up the stairs because Kyle wanted to go, because my ex-husband was talking a bunch of shit, especially about Kyle, and Kyle like ran up the stairs, and I tripped, and I ended up in the hospital that night.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was just it ended up just being bruised, like not sprained or anything, my foot, but that was a lot. So that all happened, and then I moved to the area, and then everything was fine. And then your son was born. So our camping trip was directly after your son was born. And so
literally
that same day. Yeah, we would drive down to the valley 3 hours. We would hook up the trailer and we would leave. So we went on our camping trip, and the first day of the camping trip, which was on the 4th of July, was totally fun. We were there. We made friends with like our neighbors and everything. Our neighbors invited us over for food because we were broke and only had turkey sandwiches.
Oh yeah.
Which is so funny because turkey sandwiches would end up being like a lot of our diet because we would be so broke.
Right.
But it was packing up and leaving that was the problem. He, again, Kylo Ren style, total temper tantrum. And this was the first time I had seen him get, I don't want to say physically violent, but more verbally violent, where he was cursing things out. He was getting upset with me, and he was like, this is not working. You don't know what you're doing. I'll do it. Da 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 da. Just like,
the fuck?
Yeah, just going off. And I'm like, what the hell?
Who the fuck pissed in your Cheerios?
Exactly. So it would be fine. We would finally end up loading up. We would drive back, the long drive back home. We would hang out with my family. My dad was there. My sister was in town. My older sister, her husband, their kids were in town. We would then go home. So we were driving home when we got to his parents' house, and we were there because Christina was there. And that night, I don't remember how everything transpired, but basically my son was with us, and I put my son down for bed, and at some point Kyle's mood just went from bad to worse. I remember yelling at Christina because her parents were out of town looking at places in Montana that they wanted to live.
Right.
And they left her with their 38.
God.
She left the damn thing on the table.
That's safe with a fucking child around.
Exactly. My 2-year-old is there, and he like went over to reach kind of for it on the table. I immediately grabbed it. I put it high up, and I yelled at Christina. I was like, you need to fucking keep this out. Like, you need to lock this shit up.
Right.
And she was like, you don't know. You're not a gun owner. Da, 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 just like going off on me. I'm like, whatever, bitch.
Like, no, you shouldn't be a gun owner, you fucking psycho.
Well, then Kyle grabs the gun and then decides he's going to try to kill himself.
Of course.
And this is after my son had gone to bed. I don't know what ended up happening, but he just went off the deep end. And Christina's flipping out, and she's like, oh my God, she always
makes everything worse.
She makes it so dramatic, but she did nothing. So what do? I run out to the balcony. I literally had to pry his hands off of this pistol and put it back up I handed it to her, where she did later go and put it in their safe, in their parents' safe, or at least she claimed that they did.
Right.
And then I was like, Christina, my son's in there. Keep an eye on him. I'm fucking taking a walk because I am not okay.
Right.
I just watched my significant other try to unalive himself.
Yeah.
With a fucking revolver.
Who has up till then been like normal and not this way. Yep. And then now all of a sudden he's just trying to kill himself, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it was crazy. So she had Kyle calm down in their living room, and I took a walk up their street by their neighbors' houses, and I am a mess. And I breathe, and I know I at this time I justify in my head, I was like, we just need to stay here overnight. Like, I don't want to leave my son. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't want to be alone with him.
Right.
At least Christina's here. She's not by any means I help, but at the time, I did not want to be alone with him.
Right.
So I end up
understand.
Yeah. So we ended up staying there, and he would tell me the next day, I don't remember any of this, but he would tell me that I would wake up every few minutes for a while hyperventilating. I don't remember it, but I would wake up hyperventilating.
Oh my gosh.
Several times. And that moment and getting over that was very challenging.
Dude, I bet.
So that was really the biggest thing that would happen. And his temperament just continued to be up and down. Very, very up and down. And I remember that he and you would communicate very so often so he could go see your son. And obviously there's times that he saw your son that I didn't even know about.
Right.
But I would actually end up getting a job after this. So actually 2 jobs. So I would...
Mind you, she's the only one working.
Yep.
Because this time, Kyle apparently, he just doesn't do that.
Yep. I was the only one working. But he would watch my son, and I would go to work. Because I had already had my job transferred. That job I would work on weekends. And then this other retail job I would work during the week. I'm telling you what, we need to have an entire episode about me working there.
For real.
Because that was a shit show.
Yeah.
That place was such a, like, the worst place I've ever worked. Just the most toxic manager I've ever had. And
I've heard some stories, and man, it's wild.
Yeah, it was so hard. So I would have 2 jobs. Kyle just watched the baby, and everything was fine, I guess.
Right.
So
you thought.
So I thought. And then after a while, he did start looking for a job because he had been working for his dad, who owned his own business for a brief period of time. And then eventually they stopped their business for whatever reason. Kyle was then looking for a job, and he would get a job eventually at this place that had a few different locations. It was like a feed store type place. But he would watch my son. And then when he got his job, we found daycare. So side note, this daycare that My son was only in there, well, because Kyle was only working for a short period of time. Kyle was only working for maybe a month and a half. It was a month exactly that he worked there. And we put my son in this daycare with this lady. And this lady, fast forward in like 2017, would be like arrested for leaving children home during the time that my son had been there, and leaving,
like home alone,
giving the kids melatonin, making them sleep so she would go to the gym and tanning.
Wow.
Yep, that was who we entrusted, because I mean, at the time I was 21. I was newly 21.
Right.
I had never had, I'd had daycare before, but I was the only one working. My income was not incredibly high. I did not qualify for assistance because I made too much. And it was like I had to pawn my child off to the lowest bidder that I could afford.
Right.
And
unfortunately, childcare is expensive.
Yeah. So my son would go there for a while, and it was just such an off place. It was so off, and I feel so guilty for ever sending him there. But Kyle did not last this job for very long, because he actually tried to unalive himself at work one day.
He likes to do this, apparently.
He does. It was because his trial was coming up. So anytime anything regarding this trial was coming up, he would get severely depressed. His mood would change, and he would become very abusive. And the very first incident that had happened was actually in September, just before he got this job. And it scared the hell out of me. And the way that it transpired is because I interrupted him during an argument. He told me, do not interrupt him. And I said, fuck you. And that's how the first incident took place. It shocked me. It scared me, and kind of almost immediately he played the whole, I'm so sorry, that's not me.
It'll never happen again.
Yep, exactly. So that would happen, and it was chaos. I was working for this company who was treating me like shit. I was working 2 jobs. The other job was kind of demanding. I worked with, I was still in caregiving as well. My son was in this sketchy ass daycare.
Right.
And Kyle would be the one who would play the victim, and he tried to tie a noose at work. Like, his employer called the police, and then they called me, and he was like, hey, I don't know if he's going to be coming home tonight. They're going to do an evaluation for him, but he just tried to unalive himself at work.
Wow.
Yep. So he ended up getting to come home. They determined he was fine, and he
was not fine.
He was not fine. And he basically said that I'm so sorry. It's the trial that's coming up. It's stressing me out. I just don't want to deal with it.
Because he's guilty.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Then after that, his trial ended up getting pushed back. But then following that, another big event was that one of his grandparents passed away. So when his grandparent passed away, his parents would come back from Montana.
They had already moved there at that point, right?
Yes, they had already moved there. Christina moved with some guy in Nevada. Oh, man.
If you're listening, hit us up. We'd like to get some info from you.
Seriously, oh my gosh, I would love to talk to you, because, oh my gosh, that must have been a hell of a story.
Literally.
But yeah, so they came back from Montana and would take care of his remaining grandparent. I think his grandpa went first.
Yeah.
And then his grandma would then follow suit, unfortunately. It's very sad. But both of those events were very traumatic for him, and he absolutely took it out on me. So it was very difficult. I think one of the most traumatic things that had happened was in December, just before Christmas, was another time that he tried to unalive himself. We had gotten into an argument in the Walmart parking lot. So we were at Walmart in the parking lot, and we were just arguing. I don't even know what we're arguing about at this point. And we'd finally gotten everything calmed down. We went back home, and Chevy, his doggo, had gotten into the garbage because he left the garbage door where we kept the garbage. He left it open. And that sent him over the deep end.
Oh my God.
And so trigger warning. This does involve violence towards animals, violence towards people. But he did try to kill his dog.
What a piece of shit.
Yep. So I was not going to let that happen.
Right.
I got between him and Chevy, and I was like, you are not touching this dog.
Yeah. Chevy was literally the best boy ever.
He was such an incredible dog. Really.
I should have taken him.
Yeah, that's right. And you should have taken him. Like, I think we've had that conversation many times.
It was just one of those things where, like, it was like me or the dog sort of thing, and I chose myself because I knew Kyle would not let me have him.
Right.
Like, it would have been a fight.
Yeah, very dangerous potentially.
Yeah,
fight.
that's why I was like, it's me or the dog.
Yeah, and you come first at that point, especially because you were pregnant at the time too. Yeah. But ultimately, this fight would be very, very physical, very bad. I would end up with a lot of bruises, big old goose egg on my forehead, and my neighbors would call the police.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because I caught him outside with a knife slashing up my passenger seat. Yep.
Are you kidding me?
I'm dead serious. Yep. The whole like front side of my passenger seat was just slashed up. It was so scary to see. And he broke off my blinker. So he did end up replacing the blinker and had his dad put it in. But
what a piece of shit.
Yep. Yeah. So that night, I had bruises everywhere. It was so traumatizing. And then through this, obviously my son woke up. So now I'm like he's trying to unalive himself off the balcony. My son's crying. I'm trying to put my son back to bed. I'm physically injured. And at this point, thank God, my neighbors called the police and the police are pounding on my door. So ultimately, they're like, you need to get your son out of here. Mm-hmm. And they're like trying to calm me down, telling me like, hey, this isn't your fault. You're not in trouble. He is.
Right.
And my neighbors took us in, and I could hear them getting him, and he resisted arrest, and they tased him. And
should have shot him.
I mean, I neither confirm nor deny whether I agree or not, but for legal reasons, that's a joke. Yeah, so that night would be very, very traumatic. The sad part is, I think in my opinion, the saddest part is that he did not go to jail. He would go to a mental hospital. And as far as I know at this point, like obviously ignoring and forgetting the very, very first time, this is his second time in a mental hospital stay.
Right.
From the time after he broke your window, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so this is like maybe a week or two before Christmas. And I tried to pretend like everything was okay. His mom would come the next day and stay with me so I wasn't alone.
Right.
And so would an old friend of both of ours. We'll call her Violet. Violet, I think, dated your brother. And Violet and I went to military school together.
Fuck Violet.
Fuck Violet. So
God, I forgot about her.
Yep. She would come over the next day because she lived in the area and we were still kind of close. But that night that he left, I was trying to pretend like I was okay. And I put on, like, my son was awake. I was trying to I calmed him down. He was fine. And we started watching some Christmas movies because Kyle had actually decorated our whole house for Christmas because he didn't have a job.
Right.
Probably got bored.
Yeah.
And so I put on this Christmas sweater that I had, and I took a picture of me, Chevy, and my son. And that picture still pops up on my memories from that day. And I look happy, and people like look at me and they're like, oh, this is such a cute picture. But little do they know what the fuck just happened.
Right.
Before that picture was taken. So this happens. He talked his way out of the mental hospital. 5 days is all he stayed.
Wow.
5 fucking days. And his trial. Not enough. So his trial had been pushed to... Again? Yep. His trial at this point had been pushed again until April is when his trial would come to. So we had Christmas. Christmas was fantastic. The day after Christmas was like a fucking nightmare.
Oh, no.
I remember he tore up my mom's apartment because she was at work and like threw her tree down because I had to wake him up. Because our whole deal was if we were going to go to the area where I was from, go to see my family for Christmas, we had to wake up early the next day so I could get to work because I had to work the next day.
Right.
But I didn't have to work until the afternoon. So I woke him up, and waking him up was a true traumatizing nightmare. Every time. That is when he was his most violent.
Yeah.
It was a very physically abusive time. And we ended up making it back. And this would continue, dude. It was like this all the time. It was walking on eggshells and praying to God I didn't make him mad enough to hurt me. Right. He fucked up my car. Actually, just before Christmas, he had slid it into a curb. He tried to fix it and fucked it up even more.
Of course. Because he doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
Exactly. So but
he thinks he does.
Yep. And his dad pretended like he could fix it and would not let me ask my dad for help.
Of course. Well, yeah, they don't want your dad to know.
Exactly. So my car would end up being on the side of the road, and your brother would be the one to tow it, which I'm sure for him was very, very satisfying. But for me, it was a nightmare.
That's like your key to get away.
From then on out, I did not have freedom. I mean, my dad let me use his car.
Right.
But it was our only car. And so I had to go to work, and Kyle would use it sometimes because he would need to go to the grocery store for whatever reason.
Right.
And he would end up fucking that car up pretty good because he would take it out in the woods while I was working.
Of course.
Yep. And he scratched the paint. My stepmom was so angry. And to this day, I feel so bad about it. I'll never be able, I can't replace it.
Right.
And another core memory I have during this time was that we ran into your brother and his girlfriend and your baby at the grocery store.
Right. I was working that day.
Yep.
And my brother was babysitting for me.
It was scary because we were there, and me and your brother's girlfriend at the time almost got into a fight.
Yeah.
Because she called me a bad mom because I just didn't, I don't remember how it even started. But ultimately, like, we just both had snarky attitudes, and I was gonna fucking fight her. But Kyle pulled me back. We walked out of the grocery store, and he laid into me and was like, how effing dare you do this? Like, how, like, that was embarrassing. That was my son in there. Like
you give a shit.
Yeah, yeah.
That was the first time he's seen him since he was 6 weeks old. Fuck off.
Yep. And I remember that day he drove home and he was speeding, just unsafe and fast by that Walmart. In I think what's a 25, he was going so fast he stopped within an inch of the car in front of him.
Oh my god.
He hopped a barrier because they were going to get out of the car and drove off. It was so traumatizing.
What the fuck?
Yeah. So after this, we're getting ready for this trial, and I have a whiteboard on my fridge. I have a whiteboard, red check marks for our fights when he would abuse me, and green, so red X's for when we'd fight, green check marks for when we wouldn't. It got to the point.
Did he know what they were for?
Yep, because he wanted to try to get better. Through the time until he would be arrested, there was not a single green check mark on there. We're talking like 30 plus days straight.
Wow.
Yep. So it is horrible. There was this one night where we were hanging out with Violet and her boyfriend.
Fuck you, Violet.
Fuck you, Violet, for this especially, because he cornered me and told me I was lying about everything. And Violet backed him up and said, I've known him for a long time. He would never do that. Despite the fact that she came to my house, saw all the bruises all over my chest, all the strangulation marks on my neck, the big ass goose egg on my forehead, right? She said, well, people make jokes about fantasizing about that stuff, and that's okay. Swear to God, she said that. They cornered me, and because I just wanted to take my son and go home because I was done.
Yeah.
I was done. Yeah. So we ended up leaving that night, thank God, and I never talked to Violet again. And I woke up early the next morning to tell my coworker that this had happened, and he heard me talking to her. He said, do you want to lie? And then we had another incident, and she never called the police. I think that I don't know. I think the reason, if people have their reasons for not calling, people get scared, people are unsure if maybe it'll escalate the situation.
Right.
But that was one of the bigger incidents that happened. And then fast forward to like April of 2015, I would be at work. This would end up being my very last day of work. And I'm finishing up my shift, and like any other day. Right. And this girl comes in. This girl. Oh, God. I didn't know her name at the time, but then my job as a cashier, as the assistant manager, as anybody's job, is to ask for their email address. Right. She tells me her email address, and when I tell you, I lost it inside. My heart sank. I'm just like, I even said her name back to her. I was like, oh, this is who you are. And she was like, oh, you know me? I was like, no, I'm not from here. You just remind me of somebody that I know, or I BS'd something. She was one of the girls who was going to be testifying against him, who was going to testify with Larry, because throughout this time, he convinced me that Larry was the one who did everything. Right. I know now that that's not true, but through the time, that's what I thought. And I clocked out so fast. She was my last customer at this store.
I gotta go, bye.
And I clocked out so fast, I ran out because I wanted to talk to her. Thank God I never found her, because I don't know how it would have gone, or what would have happened, or what I would have found out.
Right. But she probably wouldn't be able to talk about it.
She probably not, but I don't know what I would have said. Right. So I ended up getting home as fast as I could. We took my son to the park. While we're there, I'm like trying to figure out, how am I going to bring this up? And I tell him, I was like, dude, you'll never guess who I saw today. And I tell him who, and he's like, what? And then for some reason or another, we start arguing because he's angry because of the trial, and like days away, I think it was at this point. And ultimately the fight escalated. We went home and escalated even worse, to the point where he's being physical with me again. My son is in the bedroom, but this time I think my son's awake. Right. And he ends up calling the police on himself. I don't know why. I don't know in what psychotic world. Like, I don't even remember what he said. It was all a blur. But I remember him calling the police, and I remember the police showing up. He was much more cordial this time because the police officer said, well, she has marks on her. We have to arrest you.
Oh my God.
And I'm devastated. I'm like, I'm not okay during this point.
Right.
My poor child's not okay. He's going to the window asking, like, where is this person? Like, what's going on?
Right.
My son at the time was like 2, and it was very traumatic. That would be when Kyle is arrested and would not be let out for 3 years. So after this happened, I that night when I had talked to the officer, he was a very nice guy. I'll never forget him. So Kyle was a very right-wing person at the time, and so was I, but a lot of it was because of him.
Right.
A lot of my viewpoints that I'd had were very racist, very homophobic, very fucked up. And we had these flags up in our home that were Don't Tread on Me, and the Gadsden flag and the Confederate flag. And the police officer pointed to both of the flags and said, well, this is why he is the way he is. You know, these really extremists, they can be like this.
Right.
And I would tell him, no, those are mine. And he was dumbfounded and kind of like, what? And they were Kyle's. Did I buy them? Yes.
Right.
But they were never mine. They were always Kyle's, because that whole side of me, that whole viewpoint, that was all Kyle.
Right.
Because if there was no a single disagreement.
If you disagreed, yeah, it was.
And I was so manipulated into this thought process that I was so public about it. I was the obnoxious. I mean, I was like that beforehand. I had always been a little bit more on the right wing side, and it just escalated and got a lot worse when I was with Kyle. Yeah. So
looking back at old Facebook posts, there was a lot on there.
Yeah, it was bad. And you can tell too when I started, like it really started when I became friends with Kyle. That's what really stirred up a lot of it.
Right.
So from like 2013 and on,
Right.
It was just excessive. Like I was like that in military school. Like me and my English teacher, shout out if you're listening, English teacher, you know who you are. We'd argue politically and stuff, but I definitely think it was just my being naive, and a lot of it just became very, very hateful because of Kyle.
Right.
So I would continue living there, and then because of the domestic violence, I was able to break my lease. So I decided, like, hey, June 1st, I'm out of here,
right.
Which was almost a year that I'd been there anyway. So I continued on my days alone. It was very hard. For the first time, had applied for public assistance because I didn't have a job. My job at the time, my boss, knowing what just happened to me, she made me, obviously she didn't put a gun in my head, but she made me write down, I quit with no notice, no empathy at all. Fuck her. Seriously.
The worst.
And then when I was struggling with Kyle, I had mentioned to somebody else that I was on the phone and said that I need money, and she offered me money and said, don't worry about paying me back. Well, that day when I told her I couldn't come back because I had just been in this situation,
right,
she was like, and I need my money back. And my dumbass actually did, despite the fact that she would have me work off the clock many times.
Right.
You're
like, nah, this makes up for
it would not have even made up a fraction of what money the company owed me.
Right.
But I was so kind of in a state of fear almost.
Right. Yeah.
That I just gave it to her.
Wow.
So I would stay there, and then Kyle's parents would help me move out, and I would actually end up moving into where Kyle's parents were staying. And I would stay with them for a whole month. And Kyle and I had a no contact order, but I did petition it. The first time it was denied. The second time it was approved. We were allowed to communicate after that. We'd write letters back and forth. We'd have phone calls.
This was while he was in jail?
This is while he was in jail.
Okay,
just in jail. He hadn't been sentenced yet to go to prison. But basically, he was waiting on this plea deal. He took the plea deal. He would do 60 days time served, and that was it. No prison time. And that was for the shooting. So we would go to his court date in middle of July when he would be sentenced. The judge basically said, F the plea deal. He actually took that plea deal and gave it to him for the domestic violence charge. So all he got for abusing me was 60 days time served. For the other offense, I think it was unlawful use of a firearm, he would be sentenced to 3 years prison and 2 years post-prison supervision, which would bring it to a total of 5 years.
Right.
That was the maximum, basically. And
which is so crazy. I feel like it should be way more.
It should be way more.
Like, there's so much more that went into it. Like, there were living people in this house that he decided to literally shoot into. Like, he could have killed someone. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. Actually, I listened to their victim impact statements, and to this day day I feel so guilty about ever having a victim impact statement of my own that I try to defend him, because I did. And I'm so ashamed of that, because those poor people,
Right.
like his aunt, the aunt of the house who was there, I think it was the main homeowner's sister who was staying there. Just her story was so sad. She was just like, she could have been hit if she had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. All of them could have.
Yeah.
But her, I think she had gotten up at night or something. And so Kyle was sentenced to prison. And that next day, I packed up all of my stuff into my car and I drove home. And that's where I would stay for 3 years.
Wow.
Yep. It was a lot. That first year of Kyle being locked up in just jail was a lot, and he would be transferred to prison like maybe within the week that he was sentenced,
Right.
and then he would go to big time prison, and that was 2014 to 2015, pretty much almost a year exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's part one. And let me tell you, unfortunately, we do have more. I do have a part 2 and possibly even a part 3,
Right,
because it's a lot.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
But it's something that I thought about after kind of the fact, so we're gonna like rewind a little bit.
Sure,
so,
no problem.
And actually, I didn't even bring it up in my story either. I just literally thought about it. But there was a couple times, I think there was only one time that you were a part of it. There was one time that you, Kyle, and Violet, and your son came into where I work.
Yeah, I remember that. That was definitely all Kyle and Violet.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. I just wanted to know how that came about.
So, yeah.
Why?
Yep, exactly. Good question. So, Kyle, Violet, and I, we hung out a lot together. Like, that's why I thought I could trust Violet.
Right.
And so we were kind of just bored, and Violet was like, hey, I think Corey's working. And Kyle was like, we should go there. And I was like, yeah, we should go there. Like, I don't know.
Right.
And
well, you didn't want to disagree either.
No, because you can't.
Yeah.
There was no reason for us to go to your work. Literally not a single reason at all.
Right. It wasn't even in the same town as them.
Exactly. And I think part of me also wanted to show up because I think you and your friends, before you had started working there, had showed up at my work. And there's still a little bit of me that wanted to kind of like, that was like, no, F you, you showed up at my work. I even had to talk to you.
Right.
Like, you know? So we were there, and it was, Kyle got some weird, odd satisfaction out of it that he could go there and like kind of scare you.
And he did.
He did. And it's sad. And I'm so sorry that I ever went along with that, because I know when you guys showed up at my work that time, when you and Lacey showed up at my work, my anxiety was through the roof. I felt like I was going to throw up. I wanted to run to the back, but my manager didn't give me the option.
I did leave. I went to the back. I mean, I didn't leave, but
yeah,
when I saw you guys walked in, like, oh,
yeah,
I was a ghost.
Yeah.
And like, luckily, like the people that I had worked with, like there, were so great, and like they knew quite a bit about what had happened and stuff like that.
Right.
And so I saw all of you guys walk in, and I was a cashier there, so I was up front, so you know, I see everybody come in and stuff, and in order to leave the store, you have to go by the registers in order to exit the store, right?
Yeah.
And so I was on that first register where if you guys were to leave, you'd have to go right by me. And so when I saw you guys, I had turned around and I faced the other girls, and they said they knew something was wrong immediately because the look on my face, and because I immediately went pale.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's wrong? And I was like, that's him. And they knew. And they're like, go to the back, go to the break room.
Right.
And we all have walkie-talkies when we were working there. So everybody, like, they had, because I pointed you guys out, so they knew.
Yeah.
When they left, they're like, okay, like, you can come back and stuff like that.
And he did that again after this, and I didn't know about this time.
Yeah, he came back. I'm pretty sure it was after, because I think that was the first time that you guys ever came.
Yeah.
But then he came back, I want to say twice, actually.
That's psychotic.
Yeah, by himself.
That was the only time I was ever a part of it.
Yeah.
And that was too much for me, and I never went back in there.
Yeah, so there was another time that he came in, and I didn't see him come in. I only saw him leave. And
That's scary.
Yeah. So I don't know how long he was even in the store for or anything. I just remember I was on that same first register again, and luckily I was distracted, so I didn't really notice it until after.
Yeah.
But I remember it vividly. I was checking out this customer in front of me, and I was talking to him because it was a guy.
Yeah.
And I look in the corner of my eye, and Kyle's walking out and he smiles at me.
That's psychotic.
Yeah, he smiles at
God.
me and he walks out.
That's scary.
So, yeah, and of course I'm working, so I can't really
Yeah, stop and leave.
I can't leave or anything. So I finish up what I'm doing and I gather myself really fast and I go in the break room just to have a minute, you know? And then I do remember one other time he came in. This time he came in and one of the guys, he worked out in the outside where where you buy the feed and stuff is.
Yeah.
Where I worked too, it was a feed store. It was a different
feed
store. But yeah. So we were working there and I remember I saw him come in again. This time also, obviously I was absolutely not, and I went back to the break room again until he had left. Only this time when he left, he sat in the parking lot.
That's scary.
In his car.
Oh my God.
Until I got off work.
No.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever told you that.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that one.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
I tried to forget that, but yeah, I remember because he came in there and he sat down there, and one of the guys, or he was I think he was in your car, and he sat in the parking lot until I got off work, but we had noticed him still being there.
Right.
So one of the guys went out because he was sitting there for so long. He went up to the car and was like, "Hey, are you okay?"
Yeah.
Just trying to get him to leave,
nice,
Yeah. Yeah. And he goes, "Yeah, it's fine. I'm just waiting for someone."
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What could he have possibly fucking waited for you for?
I don't know.
Oh my God.
The guy came back and he told me this, and immediately I called my dad.
Yeah.
And I called my brother, and I shit you not, they were there within minutes.
Good.
And unfortunately, I think that scared him though.
Yeah.
When he talked to him, because by time they got there, he was already gone.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, thank God. But
yeah. No, I did not know that this even happened.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's so scary.
I remember that now.
I wonder if all of that is what sparked the interest for your brother and his girlfriend at the time to come to my job. Because they came into my work one day, and I had told my manager, because I had seen them walking by before my manager was going to leave for the day, and it was just me in the store by myself, no one else.
Right.
And your brother and his girlfriend walk in, and she gave me permission, and she had already called the security guard ahead of time and was like, "Hey, we might have an issue. Yeah, my assistant might call you."
Right.
And she told me if they walk in the door, and I couldn't, obviously I can't just call because, whatever, but if anything was said,
right,
then I could call security.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing was ever said. They walked in, his girlfriend glared at me, and I asked them if they needed any help because I have to. That is my job.
Right.
She didn't say anything. They walked around and then they left. It was scary.
Weird.
It was scary.
I didn't know about that.
For me, it was terrifying because I was by myself. I was alone. There was not a single other person in that store,
right,
but those two.
Right, yeah.
And at the time, obviously now, no shame. Shout out to your brother.
Right.
No, nothing at all.
Yeah.
I know that he was just trying to protect you. Mm-hmm. And they, I don't know. I'm just wondering. And it would make sense if that sort of situation is what made that happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know about that. I didn't know that they went to the store.
Yeah, that did happen once. I
didn't know that. I mean, obviously I knew when me and Lacey went there because obviously I was there, but...
Yeah, a lot happened in that first year.
Yeah.
Kyle and I were together. It feels like so much. I mean, here we are. It's already over an hour that we've been talking about this story. I'm really excited to get into part 2 because there's still so much more to share. But thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate you, and come back. Share, listen, share with your friends because we want them to come.
Follow our Instagram too. I usually, whenever we post an episode on the podcast, I try to do a corresponding post on Instagram. You can see some of our earlier text messages. You can see our first messages that Dani sent me on Instagram over there. So check us out and keep listening. Bye.
Bye.